back to the Wealth Approach and the fourth episode of our Legacy series. Today, we're going to go into the actual family meeting. And when we host a family meeting, more likely than not, there's emotions in that aha moment that's so invaluable to families. What is a family meeting, and why does it have such a positive effect on families? In today's episode, we're going to walk you through a family meeting and why it's important for your family's future. In the previous episode, we did the pre-family meeting. So you've set the stage for what you want to discuss, who's going to be involved, how much information, and where you're going to get to with the actual family meeting. A family meeting between the heads of the family, who they decide when, what, where, the information to share, the legacy and values has already been decided. So here we go into the family meeting, David. So let's talk about the actual family meeting and where we get started.
Yeah, Jared, I think, like you pointed out, a lot of the legwork has been done up to this point, but I would say that there's still an opportunity to help, one, bring clarity to what the future holds, and two, help define that future for the family. So as far as legacy and some of the benefits that you're looking to come out or come away with as a family, it's one, what does the family legacy mean to the individual participants, to the matriarch and patriarch, and how they communicate to the next generation. Two is the structure of the assets and what may be received by the beneficiaries or the next generation. And three is kind of some of the rationale. So those are three of the key benefits. So if we go back to the first one, and really it's the clarity on the legacy of the family and kind of what the objectives are. Jared, I think as you've gone through some of these meetings with families, you've seen that as you prep, we've had the opportunity to talk to the matriarch, the patriarch, and really get firsthand knowledge of how they feel, the information they want to share, and what they want to impart on their kids. When we show up in person and the kids are there for the first time, the second generation, a lot of times parents are surprised to learn that a lot of the things that the kids repeat back are the values that they have instilled over the many years that they've had an opportunity to communicate.
And one of the most important things with the legacy aspect in doing the family meeting is really hearing the stories directly from mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, and really have that out there, because so many times those stories aren't shared and they're lost when one generation passes away. And it's one of my favorite things about the family meeting is really connecting the stories to because we hear them over the years from the stories, and it's not the same us sharing them versus you being able to share those directly. And it's so important for the legacy connection and the communication that goes with that. And like you said, David, it's always interesting to see from the pre-family meeting to then when you go around the room to say, what did mom and dad or grandma and grandpa leave in you, to see how much overlap there is. And there's usually such an extra emotional connection that goes into these that it's just, you have to experience it. And that's why these family meetings are so important.
Yeah. And I think having the legacy as a foundational starting point is important, because that's what's going to guide the rest of the conversation, the purpose for the assets, right? So what are the values, what are the takeaways that the family values and wants to instill in the next generation? And how do the assets really support that mission and that vision? So as we get into then the second bucket we talked about, which is the assets, a lot of times there's different types of assets, and values may not necessarily be relevant for any conversation or for every conversation, but there are some common themes, and sometimes those assets, like we've seen, are, for example, a vacation home, right? That's used by the future generations to come together. And so sharing that information, the purpose of why some of these assets are in place, I think helps bring more clarity to how everything's structured and how it can work together.
And when you think about that, David, the receiving $1 million inheritance is not just a check in the mail. It's not just, a lot of times it's like you said, a piece of real estate. What responsibility goes with it? You have to pay the taxes. You have to keep the upkeep, the maintenance, you name it. It might be a retirement account. There's tax planning and other things that go with that. It could be a trust account that has its own tax return. There's a lot of nuances to walk through and explain what it's going to mean when you inherit that $1 million. Because again, it's typically not just money in a bank. And again, walking through that detail is so helpful to make sure it's communicated. And then more importantly, that your kids or grandkids are prepared ahead.
Yeah, and I think it sparks an interesting conversation for the generations ahead, because you want to make sure that that estate plan is integrated across generations. So you might have a conversation with the parents, but then the next conversation is with the kids to make sure that they're, like you said, prepared to receive it and the estate is properly structured. And then I think the third thing is the rationale, right? So it's important to have these conversations, Jared. Like you said, a lot of times kids may not hear it directly from their parents in terms of how a decision was reached or what some of the rationale is. And as we've seen recently, the number of blended families and the types of families and configurations have grown significantly. So having that in place ahead of time can help alleviate a lot of stress, anxiety, uncertainty on the side of the kids and on the side of the parents, to make sure that the kids understand the intention behind it, how the rationale and process that took place to get them to exactly where they want to go.
And this could be the most difficult part of family meetings, especially as you hit modern families. We've all seen the movies where someone passes away, the lawyer's reading the will and how assets are split, and somebody doesn't get it or is cut out, and the emotion that goes into that. This is a difficult part as you look at explaining why you decided as a family to split assets certain ways. And for your kids or grandkids to hear that, it could be a challenge. And these are the things to work through. But it's way more important as a family to have that in the open and for them to hear why you decided certain things as a unit. And as you can imagine, with modern families, it can really be a challenging environment. But again, it is so important to be proactive on communicating this part of the family meeting.
So Jared, I think this is an important first step. And, maybe to summarize, you've taken a lot of, steps and actions to prepare you for the family meeting. At this point, you're now have gone through and had that family meeting, but I would look at that as really the start of the journey, not the end. And it's really the beginning to open collaborative communication and communication across generations. So providing the opportunity to make adjustments, providing the opportunity to share your point of view, and providing the opportunity to really build a shared mission, vision for the family and a legacy statement that'll bring clarity to the future generations as well.
Well, and when you look at the importance of the family meeting itself is really to listen to your kids or grandkids as well, because sometimes you might have a charitable intent and they might think a little differently. They might want to support something else as opposed to it's really opening that communication between generations that facilitates, right? This is the start of it, as you said, David. There's going to be follow-up, there's going to be takeaways. And again, listening to your kids is going to be helpful on integrating and making things better. And then more importantly, from the kids' generation, they've now heard what's coming or how to plan around it. And it's so critical to make sure that there's coordination between generations. And having this family meeting, you've just started that process, and it's so important. So with that, I want to thank you for tuning in our next episode, how to teach your children to handle the wealth and responsibility, especially after you've had this family meeting. Is it a burden or is it a gift on how you handle it? The more prepared and open and communicate as a family, the better you are. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us and look forward to the next episode.